It is an honor to be here with you all this afternoon and be out of D.C. and back in Charleston. I used to practice law downtown here before being elected to Congress, and I practiced over on East Bay and Calhoun. And every single day, I would drive down Calhoun Street to go to work, and every single morning, Mother Emanuel Church just jumped out at me. It is such a majestic structure that you cannot help but notice it whenever you drive down that street. And I was reminded every single day of its legacy. And 4 years ago, tomorrow, our city was fundamentally changed by a horrific act of violence. 4 years ago, the holy city was confronted with the worst in humanity. And we met it with the best in response: forgiveness, compassion, and a commitment to do and to be better. In the wake of this tragedy, we have committed ourselves to having real, authentic conversations about race and social justice, just like the ones we're having here today. These conversations are not always easy, but they are necessary. The folks who take the stage today and who will discuss topics and ask questions, they're going to be painful and maybe even tough to hear. They may offer different and competing visions for a change, but everyone here loves this city and the people in it. And I want to say thank you to the Charleston Forum for creating this space in which we can have that conversation. You know, an optimistic view of our nation is the story of the long, sometimes agonizing, slow march towards equality. Of course, sometimes we've slipped backwards. The achievements of Reconstruction were followed swiftly by the horrors of Jim Crow. I serve with civil rights heroes in Congress who put blood, sweat, and tears into passing the Voting Rights Act, only to see in recent years a rash of restrictive voting rights practices put into place. When Martin Luther King Jr. said, "The arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends towards justice," he wasn't suggesting that justice and progress are inevitable. The moral arc of the universe bends towards justice because with our words and with our actions, we grab that arc with our hands and we pull it towards justice. Progress in our country has always been an active struggle. It has always been a fight, and we're still in that fight today. It is my belief that the exaggerated role of dark money, voter suppression, and corruption hinders that progress. As election spending soars to new heights, politicians rely more and more on special interests shielded from public scrutiny by shadowy organizations. And at the very same time, voting rights are under widespread, systematic attack. When special interests and large corporations set the agenda, whose voices are left unheard? When voters, most often in communities of color, are systematically disenfranchised, whose will is really being reflected? Our political system drowns out the voices of everyday Americans and blocks progress on a whole host of civil rights issues. We will not make substantial progress on racial, gender, and economic equity until we get dark money out of our elections and ensure that voters actually have a voice by ending gerrymandering and voter suppression. Big money is standing in the way of getting things done. Our pay-to-play politics are why we are charged the most of any developed nation for prescription drugs. It's why children in communities across the country still lack clean drinking water and why they breathe poisonous air. It's why financial interests have been able to defeat consumer protection measures that could prevent predatory targeting of communities of color. Making Washington listen to and work for the American people is the first step towards ensuring civil rights protections for all Americans. A world where the criminal justice system doesn't criminalize being poor or simply being a person of color. An economy where people of all races and genders can earn the same pay for the same work. A government that prioritizes special interests is not a government that prioritizes the needs of working families and people of color, period. That's why I have not taken one single dime from any PACs or special interest. Special interests have had a stranglehold over our American politics, controlling policies, legislation, and even the terms of debate. That's why I'm proud to co-sponsor legislation that reins in the influence of dark money and brings more transparency to our campaign finance system. But right now, voting rights are under attack in this country. Between 2012 and 2016, majority-minority urban counties saw an average loss of 7 polling stations and 200 poll workers. In the 6 years since Shelby v. Holder, 16 million voters have been removed from rolls all across the country. This is a travesty. The ability to meaningfully participate in our democracy is a racial justice issue. Voting is one of our most important civil rights, and restriction of voting rights is not a Democrat or Republican idea, it's an American one. That's why I co-sponsor legislation that creates automatic voter registration and expands early voting while targeting the policies that lead to disenfranchisement. And I'm proud the House, instead of delivering rhetoric, is delivering results. I'm proud the House passed H.R. 1. It passed legislation that prohibits the indiscriminate purging of eligible voters from rolls and allows voters discriminated against by strict voter ID laws to cast ballots with an affidavit. That's also why I support restoring voting rights to citizens with felony convictions after they've completed their prison sentences. It's why I voted for legislation that would combat gerrymandering by requiring states to adopt independent redistricting commissions. Politicians should not be drawing lines to choose their voters. Voters should be allowed to choose their politicians, period. The Declaration of Independence proclaims that governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. And it's a pretty radical notion. The founders believed that our government is only legitimate with the people's consent. But who has consented to the new and unnerving attacks on our right to vote? Who's consented to a lack of power in that vote due to partisan gerrymandering? To a government that's beholden to special interest? You know, I worked as an ocean engineer, and engineers, well, we love to fix things that are broken. But you don't need a STEM degree to tell you that our politics is broken. The engine of our democracy is failing, and its decline impacts communities of color the most. That's why I'm proud of the legislation we've passed in the House to take special interest out of the driver's seat and make sure that Washington serves the people. My first 6 months in D.C., we've passed a host of great bills for this country and for voting rights. But we're just getting started. Trust that it will be a fight. Many of you showed up here today, showed up because you're in this fight. And this fight for justice, for equality, goes on. But we must keep that attitude that this is a fight that we cannot and we will not lose. And I want to close tonight with a line from the greatest fighter of all time, Muhammad Ali. A friend of mine had run into Muhammad Ali years back in Louisville, and he ran across the street to greet him. He ran up to him and said, Champ, you're the best, man. You're the best there's ever been. I've only ever seen you down once. And Muhammad Ali quickly corrected him and said, listen, you ain't ever seen me down. I was either up or I was getting up. That is the attitude we must carry into this fight. We are never down and out. We're either up or we're getting up. And the fight goes on, and we cannot be worried about the opposition. We cannot be swayed or misguided by anything that they throw at us. We have to remain vigilant. And as I've been told, we have to remain noble in this fight. And trust that the nobility in others, while sometimes sleeping but never dead, will eventually rise to meet your own. Thank you.